What's up, guys? Dr. Seth back to help you solve your powerlifter problems. And the problem we're going to be solving today is majoring in the minors. And this is going to turn into a series that I'm going to call Don't Be a Nerd. Because what happens when people are nerdy about training is they get introduced to neat concepts in biomechanics and they end up obsessing over those concepts without realizing what they really mean, what they really influence, and why they probably don't need to obsess about them. Because, guys, the nerds, they don't get strong, they don't get jacked, and I don't want you to be one of them. So, yesterday, Trevor Jaffe made a post about Penation Angle, and his point was that you shouldn't care about it. And I 100% agree. I just wanted to get into why Penation Angle really doesn't matter for the application of training. Yes, it does matter physiologically. Yes, it does matter anatomically. But in terms of you lifting a barbell, it ain't something that you need to worry about. So let's get into her. First thing we're going to talk about is the line of action of a muscle. And when we are looking at a muscle, no matter which direction the fibers run, the line of action is going to be the line between the tendon origin and the tendon insertion. A muscle can only pull along this line. It's only going to get shorter along this line, and this is the only line that it can produce force along. No matter where the fibers are doing, this to this point, this line up and down here, that is the line that matters when we're thinking about shortening a muscle. With a muscle like the brachialis where the fibers run parallel, this is pretty easy to see, pretty easily to visualize. When we get to a muscle like the lat, where we have some fibers that are angled more like up and down here, some fibers that are angled more horizontally here, that's where line of action arguments can start to arise, because depending on which direction the humerus is moving, the force will be more directly transmitted along certain fibers versus others. Like if we're pulling the humerus more straight down versus like kind of more around and back, it's going to change whether the straight down fibers or the more horizontal fibers are going to be getting more work. Now that isn't to say the difference between a vertical pull and a horizontal pull. That's the difference between, I can't move this arm, I should lean over so you can, wrong direction. So that's not to say like it's going to be the difference between a vertical pull and a horizontal pull, because if the elbow is tucked and being driven down, that's still the fibers that are going to be more driving the elbow down, right? What I'm talking about with the difference of fiber orientation of the lat is whether we are driving elbow down or whether we are pulling elbow around, and that's going to be what changes which lat fibers are going to be targeted. Now, two things before we move on. This, number one, for this video, has nothing to do with Penation Angle, and number two, the differences in training stimulus, it's going to be so minuscule that trying to angle your humerus differently on a pull to change different angles for different variations of hypertrophy isn't going to matter for the powerlifter. It isn't going to matter for, the average gym goer. It might matter for an IFBB pro, for someone who is trying to reach the top of the top, but like that stuff is like we can play with it, we can feel it, we can use it. We shouldn't really obsess over it. But that, again, that's not the point of the video, because line of action, it's not anything to do with Penation Angle, because what Penation Angle is, actually, never mind. I want to introduce this concept first. I forgot what I was making my slideshow. The first thing I want to talk about is cross-sectional area. Actually, fuck it. Let's go Penation Angle first. So, Penation Angle, when we're talking about Penation Angle, we have the line of pull. We have the line along the muscle from origin to insertion. What Penation Angle is the degree that the fibers are offset from the line of pull. So basically, if the tendon, if the muscle fiber is pulling side to side in this picture, the fibers are off kilter from that axis. Now, what we need to remember with Penation Angle is that no matter what direction the fibers are going, the muscle can only shorten along the line of pull. These fibers are going to contract, these fibers are going to contract, the muscle will get shorter along its line of pull, not the direction of the tendon, because there's nothing anchoring up here there's no attachment up here for this fiber to pull the muscle upwards. That's going to get shorter, but the muscle is only anchored at its origin, at its insertion. So we are only going to see shortening along the direction that the tendon axis runs. That's all that matters with shortening. So why the hell does Penation angle even exist? Why is it a thing? Why have we developed Penation angle in certain muscles but not others? And one of the big things is the idea of cross-sectional area. So if we slice a muscle parallel to the fibers, that gives us the cross-sectional area. The number of fibers, like in parallel in the cross-section, the more fibers we have in a cross-sectional area, the more force production can happen. That is one advantage of Penation angle, because if we're visualizing Penation angle on a muscle with parallel fibers, the anatomy, if we just slice across the muscle, the cross-sectional area is going to be the same as the actual fiber cross-sectional area. If we have penation, where the fibers are running offset to the axis of pull, the anatomical cross-section area is going to be much lower than the cross-sectional area if we actually look at the fibers. So with pennated muscles, we get more physiological cross-sectional area, we get more practical cross-sectional area per actual measurement of like slicing the muscle in half. If we slice along parallel to the fibers, we get more cross-sectional area, which means that per unit muscle, we can pack more contractile unit into the same given muscle volume. So with a pennated muscle, we have more shit that can contract per like muscle length, which is very neat. The second thing that happens with Penation angle is what we're going to call architectural gear ratio, which means that because these muscles are on an angle, I'm not going to give you guys a trigonometry lesson, so if you don't understand trig, you might just have to kind of trust me, because I don't want to get into the whole SOHCAHTOA thing for a YouTube video for powerlifters. But if the fibers are shortening along this line, if the fibers are shortening along that line, the tendon axis is running along that line. If we have shortening along this line, more shortening will happen along this line relative to this line. What that means is that per fiber contraction, per fiber shortening with a pennated muscle, there will be less muscle shortening. So per contractile unit shortening, the contractile units are, where's my fucking hand at the screen? The contractile units are happening on like that angle, and the fiber line is on that angle. God, this is hard because it's mirrored on my end anyways. So if we have shortening here, relative to the shortening that happens here, there is going to be less shortening here, which means that it's essentially like you're on a bicycle, you shift into a lower gear so that you can have more relative torque to get up a hill. It's changing the gear ratio because the work being done at the fiber happens at a different rate than the work being done at the global muscle, which can then give us mechanical advantage. The trade-off is that because there's more shortening at the fiber, less shortening at the muscle, it means that the contraction will be slower, but we do have more potential to produce force. Now, the cool thing about that is that as the muscle gets shorter, I just squished the picture so you can kind of visualize it. As the contraction happens, as the muscle gets shorter, what we're going to see is that the penation angle is going to increase and the architectural gear ratio will change as the fibers shorten and therefore rotate, which means that if we have a pennated muscle, the shorter it gets, the greater the mechanical advantage will be, the greater potential to produce force at the limb will be, but the slower the limb will move relative to fiber contraction. Now, that is super cool, that is super neat, but the thing is, it doesn't matter when you are powerlifting, because the penation angle doesn't influence line of pull, doesn't influence where things go, it influences the speed at which things move, but on a given day, your penation angle is what it is. The pennated muscles are pennated muscles. The muscles that are fusiform, that are parallel, they're not going to magically become pennated. The muscles that are pennated, Penation Angle actually can change with training, but again, it's going to be a slow adaptation. It's going to adapt to training, and you're not going to really be able to train for Penation Angle. Penation Angle will change with training as muscles kind of adapt and change structurally based on the training demands. But it's not like you can train for this Penation Angle or train for that Penation Angle or train for this, train for that, blah, 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 blah. So when you're lifting, your Penation Angle kind of is what it is on that day. You're not going to be able to bias movements to alter it. You're not going to be able to really use it to your advantage. The advantage is just there and you are using it. It's not something to think about. It's something that just intuitively happens by biological design. In terms of the line of pull argument, it's not going to change line of pull at all because the line of pull is between tendon origin, tendon insertion, that line, fiber orientation does not change relative to that line, does not change line of pull. With something like the lat, where it is a broad sweeping origin, yes, that can make a difference in terms of what fibers are getting more tension in different places. But the lat, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about pennation, not orientation within the lat. So they are two different things, and Penation Angle, very cool in how it can influence application, but it's not something that you need to think about to apply training. So guys, here is me helping you guys not be a nerd, helping you understand the complex stuff so that you can realize why it actually is kind of simple and why it doesn't need to change how you train. And in doing that, you're not going to major in the minors, you're going to be a better lifter, and you're going to be able to put more mental energy into moving the bar rather than thinking about stuff that isn't going to make you stronger. So hopefully you guys like this. Hopefully you got something out of it. Hopefully you were bare minimum entertained by my ranting and putting these out as a means to show you guys a little bit of what it will be like in my lecture series coming up here in November. I'm going to be getting into deeper subjects. I'm going to be getting more long form. I'm going to be getting more sciencey. And I'm going to try to present information in a way that is going to be easily absorbable so that you guys can take what I'm talking about and immediately apply it to managing your own training, managing your clients' training. Because the reason I'm doing the lecture series on bridging the gap between rehab and training is that that is a disgustingly giant hole that needs to be filled. That's what she said. But the thing is that when someone goes from, getting cleared by their medical team to begin training, to going back to training, that is where I see the most mistakes made. That is where I see the most loss of progress. That is where I see the most regression back to a medical team, just because people don't understand why or how to manage rate of progression on their way back to the platform. And that is what I really want to get deep into for different types of injuries, different types of injury mechanisms, and different things that we are looking at healing, different things that we're looking at influencing pain-wise, and understanding why things hurt, understanding how to manage hurt, and then understanding how to manage training around that. By figuring that shit out, you will no longer need me, which is cool because that is the ultimate goal of all the information I'm putting out, is I want coaches to be able to do my job for me, essentially. So hop on that lecture series if that sounds sick for you. Link will be below. Early bird sale is ending October 1st, so hop on there because I'm going to jack up the prices as spots fill up, simply because A, I want to give people a deal for hopping on early, and B, I don't want to have to answer questions from like a million people, so I'm going to jack up the price as it gets more full to save me some pain in the ass down the road. Peace out, guys. Thank you for watching. See ya.